If you don't know of or aren't using these tips in Overwatch 2, you're literally trolling. These tips are incredibly important to play support more effectively in Overwatch 2. Let's not waste any time. If you're playing on in Overwatch 2, you're going to be spending a lot of time dueling flankers like Genji, Tracer, Sombra, or Reaper. But it's incredibly important that you know how to fight those flankers. Even though you have your support passive and powerful abilities, they can be tricky matchups if you don't know what you're doing. For Tracer, if you land a sleep dart on Tracer and have no guarantee of follow-up from the rest of your team, and she has recall, it's important that you do not use nade immediately on the sleeping Tracer, as she will be always able to recall before you get the one-shot combo of shoot, nade, melee. It's instead important to sleep and wake her with shoot plus melee. This will guarantee one of two things. Either she will blink out of the sleep, in which case you can hit one shot or nade to finish the kill, or she'll immediately mash that recall, but you still have your biotic grenade to continue that duel. If you use your nade, she's able to both waste your nade and sleep dart with one recall, and you hate to see it. For Genji, this is a bit of a basic tip, but it's actually really important that you hit the first shot. Hitting one shot puts Genji in a range where if he dashes you, nading the floor puts him in one-shot territory. So if you hit the first shot as he's trying to close the distance, you'll either do one of two things. He'll disengage, he'll dash on you, or a deflect. Forcing him to make a decision instead of fishing for shuriken headshots is really, really important. Once or if he does dash on top of you, make sure to look directly at the floor to avoid getting your nade deflective. Not only will you get the healing benefit, but you'll also splash the Genji who will take the damage in the anti-nade effect. At that point, it's a guarantee that you'll be forcing his deflect, which makes for an easy sleep dart, or even better, an easier shot. For Sombra, it's more about what you don't do rather than what you do. Sombra's Virus is a very effective ability that places a 100 DOT on you for 4 seconds, 2 seconds if you're hacked. However, it's important to note that Biotic Grenade does not cleanse the DOT. You'll still take the damage from it. Doesn't mean that you shouldn't be nading yourself, it just might mean that Health Pack might be more effective because the Health Pack, unlike nade, does not only heal you, it actually cleanses the DOT effect entirely. And finally, Reaper. Similarly to Tracer's Recall, Reaper's Wraith is his kind of get out of jail free card. However, you want to avoid stacking both Sleep Dart and Grenade because in that situation, all he has to do is Wraith, cleanses your Biotic Grenade, allowing him to heal himself, and then now you have no abilities. What I like to do is try to force his Wraith with either Sleep Dart or Grenade, depending on what range that he's playing at, and then save that second ability just in case he decides to pursue me after using Wraith form. For Baptiste, we have two relatively simple tips for his abilities, but incredibly important ones. It's very common for Baptiste to make the mistake of when they start to take significant damage, when they know they're going to lamp, to use their regenerative burst first and then lamp afterwards. But whenever possible, you want to avoid this. If the enemy team uses an ultimate that's going to force both of your abilities, the order is very important. You want to use the lamp first, take the damage until your critical HP and the lamp is about to break, then regenerative your burst, back yourself to full HP. Not only will this allow you to survive more abilities and more ultimates more often, but even if you die, you will at least allow yourself to survive a little bit longer, putting out a little bit more pressure. And while we're on that note, even in situations when you don't need to lamp, avoid regenerative bursting too early. That crit heal when people are under half HP, that double heal, very important to be leveraging that when you're playing Baptiste. For Brig, the tip is relatively simple as well. With her new buff from Whip Shot from 70 damage to 80 damage, the new one-shot, not exactly a one-shot, but the new one-shot combo for Brig is swing, swing, shield bash, animation cancel, and the Whip Shot. The new breaking point threshold is that you only need to swing twice to kill 200 HP targets. So do this really quickly. 1, 2, bash, Whip Shot. You can even do this faster if you animation cancel the shield bash into the Whip Shot. I'll demonstrate that here. 1, 2, bam, bam. For Illari, there's lots of tips out there about pylon placement and even some jump techs that I came up with the pylon. However, one of the things that we're going to be talking about today is more of what not to do. It's actually really important that you understand the value of meleeing as Illari, as that 30 damage can be very impactful in duels. However, it does cancel your solar regeneration on your damaged rifle. For example, when I shoot my shot, it takes a while to charge the shot back, right? However, there are a few things that pause that. One of which is important to note, is that the melee actually pauses the solar damage regeneration. So if you're utilizing your damage and then weaving in melees in between there, you actually need to be pretty careful and avoid doing that unless it's absolutely necessary, as it will prevent you from being able to charge your shot back. In addition to that, and I feel like this one's probably a little bit more common knowledge, but healing pauses the solar regeneration as well. So it can actually be very bad to weave heal and damage. You generally want to focus on one or the other. Your heal resource will regenerate while you're damaging. I don't really know why this is the case. Maybe it's something they'll patch out in the future, but that's how it is right now. For Kiriko, I'm going to feel bad about explaining this tip. It's actually just going to be about abusing your hitbox. Kiriko is one of the nastiest, tiniest, most obnoxious strafing hitboxes in the entire game. So if you're on PC, 80-80 strafe. If you're on console, use that analog stick back and forth and spam those kunai. She's incredibly difficult to hit if you're abusing that 80-80 strafe. Not only will you be leveraging her tiny hitbox, but her 80-80 strafing pattern is extremely wavy, for lack of a better term. I'll have some video demonstration of this on screen, but this makes it incredibly hard to consistently hit Kirikos that are abusing not only the spam value of her kunai, but abusing the tiny, tiny, and unpredictable hitbox that Kiriko has. 2 tips for Lifeweaver. 1 for the healing. Big shout out to Boo Blicker here for the tip on how to maximize your healing output. The basic takeaway for this one is that it's in fact really, really bad to spend time with your healing charge at 75 if you're trying to maximize your healing per second. If for every 0.1 second that you're at 75 charge and haven't released the healing blossom, you're essentially not healing. So the calculation is that it's actually better, with calculating human error, to not fully charge a healing blossom and aim for around 65, 70, or sometimes even less if you're trying to maximize the consistent healing per second output. Main takeaway, when in the middle of a firefight, in the middle of a really heated fight, don't worry about fully healing your blossoms, as the healing loss from not fully healing your blossoms is so insignificant. However, overhealing your blossoms is a lot more significant. Second off, it's just a little tech. It's actually pretty important to reach certain spots in certain maps. Utilize the pedal bounce. Throw your pedal on the floor and then press jump at the end of the animation. This will allow you to access certain areas of the map after the little extra bounce of momentum there. Highly recommend using this tip. Get to a point where you can do this without thinking, because having to think about it in the middle of a firefight while you're trying to escape from somebody can be pretty bad. Lucio time. And there are so many micro tips of this support that are well documented in other videos. I want to do something that may be a little bit more unique, and that's similar to Kiriko, abuse the strafe pattern. But don't just abuse the strafe pattern by rapidly tapping AD or rapidly using your analog stick, because the way that Lucio's head hitbox works is it'll actually stay in center line, so it will be like you're not even strafing at all. In addition to that, Lucio has an inherent ability to change his speed. Obviously, that's Lucio. Actually, can be very powerful to spam your speed and heal RS back and forth, because not only does it make your movement unpredictable with the different 80-80 strafe patterns, but it actually means that you change speeds rapidly, so it can be very unpredictable to shoot consistently. Key takeaway here, utilize the 80-80 strafing pattern with Lucio when you're dueling somebody, but also abuse the fact that your RS can change your speed as well. For Mercy, there are way too many videos out there on way too many important tips that I could give away in one video. Highly recommend checking out Skiesti and Neander with their phenomenal Mercy guides. However, one tip that I would give, well, actually 2 tips that I would give for Mercy, is to be able to utilize the reverse GA by flicking your camera screen. If you haven't paid attention to patch notes in the last year or so, reverse GA, which is the bounce backwards, is actually a lot slower than it used to be. So it's really important whenever you can, whenever you're trying to create distance between yourself and the target that you're healing, to flick your camera all the way around in the opposite direction you're trying to bounce from. So I'm going to generate some momentum, and I'm going to press spacebar. And you can see how much further and how much faster I move than if I use the S key or the reverse stick than, when I'm utilizing the GA that way. So it's much more important to turn the camera when you're trying to go for speed or distance. If you're not trying to go for speed from distance, it's okay to go backwards, but it is a lot slower. In addition to that, utilize the res grace period. There's a certain area, meter, a radius where I can apply the res. This is too far. Notice, however, if I spray here, let me get a better spray. If I spray here and then I actually go for the res afterwards, there's a grace period of when you actually start the res before it breaks. So I can start the res from up close, but I can actually extend the range by backing up during the res animation. Do you see that? So the ability to get the res off is a lot more forgiving than where you actually start the res. So abuse that whenever you can if you're trying to get behind cover for a safer res. Moira, and this one's really, really simple, but it's actually unbelievable the number of Moira players that don't know this, even in higher ranks. Guys, the damage orb regenerates healing resource back. So check out my healing resource right here. So it generates back slowly on its own, and also if I do damage with my right click, but your damage orb actually regenerates healing resource now even faster. So does this mean that there's no more use for heal orbs? Well, no, not exactly. There's lots of uses for heal orbs still. However, if you're low on resource, don't automatically assume that heal orb is the best bet. Sometimes it can actually be a damage orb, because if you get the full 200 damage out of it, it is unbelievable, not only the amount of damage, but the amount of healing resource that you regenerate. Abuse this. Finally, Zenyatta, and there's a surprising number of tips for Zenyatta. I actually want to include 3 tiny little ones. First off, it's the not so well-known fact that right-click DPS is much lower than left-click spam. So the only reason you should be right-clicking is if you're behind cover or you don't want to be peeking a sniper, so it allows you to charge up damage without actually peeking. But if they're in the middle of a fight or you are safe to be shooting, you really should be spamming left clicks as much as you possibly can. One of the advantages of right click is the element of surprise. It kind of one-shots people before they get a chance to react, but the upsides of that are much, much, much more overcompensated by the downsides of just doing a lot less damage. In addition to that, if you are going to right click while moving from cover to cover, make sure that you don't fully charge the right click. As soon as I see 5 orbs on my screen, that's when you can let go. So if you see right here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, I can let go immediately. There's an additional half a second to a full second afterwards where I can continue to charge, but I don't really get any extra value beyond that point right there. So keep that one in mind. In addition to that, while we're on the right-click train, be very careful about the value of right-click in duels. So right-click is actually a very, very noisy ability, and it's something that can give away your position. In addition to that, the delay from right-clicking into left-clicking is pretty tangible. So if I go from a charged volley into primary fire, whether that's on console or PC, I'm not going to be able to primary fire immediately after launching my charged volley, which gives a slight opportunity, especially for flankers, to engage on me without worrying about taking any damage. In addition, as I said earlier, it also gives away your positioning. So one of the common mistakes for Zenyatas when they're fighting flankers or just dueling people up close is to use a right click behind a corner to try and peek, but then all that gives is the enemy team or the enemy person the time to disengage or hide. And then as soon as I've launched that right click, I'm now naked, exposed, vulnerable for about half of a second. So actually, a lot of the times when you're dueling people, especially if they can hear you charging that right click, especially if they're flankers with a lot of mobility, it's actually smarter to not use any right clicks and just to pop and immediately catch them by surprise, because remember, your character is totally silent. So be very careful about how you use a right click up and close in duels is the main takeaway. It definitely, there's a time and a place for it. It can be very effective. Just keep in mind that it will lock you out and it will give away your positioning. So sometimes it's not always the best play. Hope you enjoyed the video. Let me know if you have any questions in the comments, and that's it.